so proud of a man.
I'm Tommy Salmons. This is year 0. Today, I had the great pleasure of speaking with a man I met a couple of years ago that has become a good friend of mine, Josh Childress. I asked Josh to come on the podcast because there is a lot going on the border. There's a lot of news stories being covered down there, and I wanted to get a voice of reason, someone who understands the border, knows how Border Patrol operates, and could shed some light on the events going on down on the southern border. But before we begin, I do have an announcement. I have started going back through old podcast episodes that had sound messed up. I know some of them that I had recorded on my headset on my phone only had sound in one ear. So I'm going back through those and I'm redoing them. I am working on the sound on them, and I am trying to get it all situated for everyone so that they are enjoyable and shareable. So don't only share the new episodes, look for those old episodes being redone. I would also ask, rate and review. 5 stars is the only amount of stars that is acceptable. And if you would like to donate, paypal.me/Tommy Salmons. If you want to reach out to me, Tommy@libertarianinstitute.org is the best email to reach me at. Or you can find me on Twitter, TD Salmons. At TD Salmons, I guess. At TD Salmons. So, if you need graphic design, RyanBunting.com. Ryan Bunting designed my logo, and he designed the cover of my upcoming book. So for all of your graphic design needs, go visit RyanBunting.com. And as always, thank you, Tom Burton, for the music. It is greatly appreciated. Here's the show. I'm here with Joshua Childress. What's going on, buddy?
Not much. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well, man. I'm doing well. It's been a busy fucking day. Trying to converse with the wife about technical issues with her computer that I do not understand at all. And then, dealing with my own shit, and I barely understand what I'm doing out here. So, it's just one of those things. How about you? How's everything going?
I've got a little bit of the opposite of the problem. It's spring break, and I'm doing the stay-at-home dad thing for now. So, trying to keep the kids busy, trying to keep myself busy. I mean, it's not like there's any shortage of shit to do, but just trying to juggle the two, and then like making sure I get a little, my side projects done as well. So, I guess it sounds like I'm busy, but it's nothing ever seems to quite get done the way you want it to.
Doesn't sound like you're busy. It sounds like you need to go fishing.
Fishing sounds fucking great.
That's what you should be doing with the kids tomorrow. Is you should get them up at like 3 a.m, go out to the lake and teach them about fishing.
Yeah. Although I mean, Tommy, you know me, like the only fish I eat is like sushi. So, if I caught a fish in the lake, I'd probably give it to somebody or toss it back.
Yeah, you can catch and release, if you catch. It's about being out there. It's
Yeah.
So.
No, I do miss that kind of solitude or that quiet and waiting and just kind of. I mean, I think we could probably all use a little bit more of that peacefulness in our life right now.
You're not lying. I'm working my ass off right now to get everything situated at the house between the chicken coop and the gardening and all that. and I'm so excited about the moment that I'm finished with all of it, so I can actually sit back and just for a second, because I mean I feel like I'm working just as hard when I'm at home as I am when I'm on the road. But that's getting ready for the spring and the grow season. That's how it goes every year.
Yeah. Yeah. I've finally got some, I mean, everything I planted this year except for tomatoes shit the bed. So, but
Hey,
I'm getting a few tomatoes. Tomatoes are nice and easy. So maybe, next season we can do a little bit better,
you might have,
but
yeah,
you know,
you might have planted just a little too early. That might have been what it was. So I know I'm worried about my beets. I'm worried I might have planted them a little too early. But my wife insisted, no, it's March. And I was like, okay, we'll go for March. But usually I do this shit in like the very beginning of April, but okay.
yeah, this is my first time ever trying, just listening to all these podcasts about agorism and everything. I'm like, well, shit, I should probably, you know, at least try my hand and start to get used to it because my dad's been doing gardening and stuff like that for a while now. So I took a little cue from him and tried my hand. Me and the boys went out and built a little, built up bed with some extra bricks that we had and bought some soil and all that. And I mean, it was a good experience, just not that fruitful so far.
Yeah, no, it's a learning experience. It's just anything else you do, you figure it out, you live, you learn, you know.
Yeah.
But we didn't get you on here to talk about gardening, Josh. We got
No,
you on here
no,
to
we
talk
didn't
about the
because
border crisis. And we better get on
yeah,
track, man, or we'll sit here and bullshit for the next 3 hours and never accomplish anything.
we have a way of doing that, don't we?
That's all right. So I sent you this video that had gone viral from CNN, and there have been some activists that have been swearing that it was a staged video, it was fake. And I asked you about it. I was like, what do you think about this? Tim Pool had talked about it. Boogie, please stop. Please stop chewing on me. Tim Pool had talked about it on his show, and he was saying that he believed it was staged because you'll never see migrants crossing a border by getting in a single file line, and they're all wearing clean masks, and some of them were wearing life jackets and yada yada yada. So I was like, well, I know one guy that would have an idea of what the fuck is going on down on the border, so let me talk to this guy. So that's why I asked you on here. So when you saw that video, what was there anything that stood out other than that? Anything that stood out that for you that you were like, this is all bullshit?
Not really. I mean, so the term staged, I mean, you could apply that several different ways. So CNN would have had to gone to probably the chief of that station to ask permission to go film, and CNN obviously is going to get permission pretty easily. So as far as like being set up and like, that station is going to know exactly where the majority of their crossings happen because all of this stuff happens in patterns. So they know where that stuff's going to happen anyways. So yeah, they probably went and asked permission to go film something and, maybe had to wait around until it happened. But these kind of things happen all the time. And when I watched that video, I was like, yeah, that was what I spent the last 2 years of my career in the Border Patrol doing.
Mhm.
Was just watching that stuff happen. And there's literally nothing you can do about it. There's, you know, we would just watch them come over. For us, we did have one section of river in, we were in the Yuma area, Yuma, Arizona. We had one section of river that we had to watch, and we would watch them come across. But the majority of the migrants that we saw came down through the San Luis area, and we would just watch them come over the fence. There's not, we can't just get up on the fence and push them back over.
Mhm.
And in the same thing with the river, you can't like pop a hole in their boat and make them go back. You
Yeah.
can't even interdict the boat because you're running the risk of causing a drowning. And the last thing any law enforcement agency wants is an international incident, and especially on camera like that. If you've got a camera rolling, you're not going to take any freaking chances, any
Yeah.
chances. So no, nothing I saw in that video seemed out of the ordinary. And it's not like, so it was mostly families, women, fathers, and children coming across. So at least in my experience, those type of migrants, they're coming here to claim asylum. So they want to find an agent to turn themselves into. They're not going to try to get away. So it wasn't like there was a risk of people absconding or anything like that. They were going to get to the other side, turn themselves in, and apply for asylum. Like that's just kind of the way it happens.
Yeah. So the fact that all right, so there were two things that they said that these activists were claiming that I was kind of like, well, I don't know if that's necessarily true. Y'all are claiming this, but that doesn't mean it's true. And one of the things they were claiming was there would be no way that a coyote would be willing to take a raft across the Rio Grande 6 times in daylight. And then the other thing that they were saying was that portion of the river south of Hidalgo, Texas, is off limits to anybody except for Border Patrol. So therefore, there was no way that CNN camera crews could get in there. So you're saying that probably even if that were the case, then they probably just got in touch with the station chief and said, hey, look, we're just trying to capture some footage. We want to see what's going on down here on the border. Is there a hot spot that you could reference us to? And they just kind of point them in the direction and say, yeah, you can come right down here.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, that's kind of a common misconception. We would have just regular civilians, regular people come down and say, hey, we just wanted to see what goes on the border. And we're like, okay, well, just kind of keep your distance. And if anything starts happening, just stay away, yeah. For safety's sake. But I mean, it's public area, so anybody can go down there. But yeah, media generally goes through the procedures. In fact, in my last couple of years there, I brought a friend, one of my old Army buddies, on a ride along, and all we had to do was go check in at the duty desk, show, kind of fill out a little liability form, show his ID, and we went out and took a little tour. So I mean, it's not out of the realm of possibilities. I was filmed in a truck by, I don't know, one of the local PBS stations while I was in, and tried to hide my face as best I could. I didn't want to be recorded personally, but no, it's not out of the realm of possibilities for media to be down there. Yeah.
No, your buddy didn't happen to be a chemistry teacher that found out he had stage 4 cancer?
No, oh. he was he was actually a Green Beret that he and I served in Afghanistan together, and we were actually supposed to go to the selection course together, but I went to the Border Patrol Academy instead of going to selection with him. And then once he made it through all of his training, he happened to come down to Yuma for free fall school. But no, he was, as far as I know, he was not a meth producer of any sort.
Okay. I just want to make sure. It was starting to sound real familiar there for a second.
Yeah. No, and as far as the coyotes operating in the day like that, yeah, normally the nighttime is when coyotes prefer to operate. It's just a little easier, cover of darkness and everything like that. Even though they know that we have night vision capabilities, it's just a little easier to operate with that, little extra level of the what's the word I'm looking for? That extra advantage that the dark provides you.
Yeah, the cover of night. Yeah.
But like I said before, I mean, these folks aren't trying to get away anywhere. So, I mean, the coyotes are running the risk that some agent may be waiting in the bushes on the other side to jump out and grab them. But all they're going to have to do is jump out of the raft and swim back across. Mm-hmm. I mean, they're not going to, I mean, they've got the upper hand in that case. So, the worst they're going to do is lose a $5 raft to get back and not get apprehended. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, yeah, if they were trying to move some migrants that were actually going to try to sneak in and get away, then yeah, they would be kind of foolish to try to operate in the daytime, just because that's not normally what they do. But with this, they're just moving, to them, this is cargo. They're just moving cargo that doesn't need to get anywhere else. Because a lot of times those coyotes, they will not only get them across the border, but they'll help them get a certain point into, into the interior and kind of point them in a direction before they go back. That's part of their contract or their deal, for the fee that they're paid. So yeah, I mean, it's to me didn't seem. The only thing I saw in that video was the union guy saying, "Oh well, we've never seen anything like this." I'm like, "What the hell are you talking about?" Like that's, Yuma was second behind Rio Grande Valley, which was where this video took place, in unaccompanied minors and family groups. So I know they were way busier than we were at that time. The end of the Bush or end of the Obama era, beginning of the Trump era. So him saying, "Oh, we've never seen anything like that," shut the fuck up, dude. Like you're just trying to, you're trying to make the case for the TV camera that this is a, some big scary crisis, and it's clearly not. It's something that we've seen for a long time.
Yeah, they are saying that the amount of people that are coming in.
Well, I read a couple of articles just kind of preparing for this, and the thing you have to do with the corporate media or mainstream media or whatever you want to call them. So the wording that stuck out to me, it says, we're experiencing a number of people heading to the border that we haven't seen in 20 years. So they, in their infinite wisdom with all their supposed resources, know exactly how many people are heading towards the border. They're not even saying crossings. They said an unprecedented number of people heading toward the border. So they're speculating at this point. I mean, they're saying that they've done some calculations and they see more than normal people heading to the border. That's not because right after that they said, and we've seen an uptick in unaccompanied children crossing the border. So you have to be very cognizant of the language that they're using, because you can read that and just, if you think you already know what they're talking about, think, oh well, yeah, we've got an unprecedented number of people crossing the border. Well, the specific language, and I personally believe that media organizations use vague language like that on purpose, because they assume, I mean, I'm sure you've read plenty of articles where the headline says one thing, and then once you read the article, it doesn't quite match exactly what the headline says. So that was at least my experience in reading some of those articles preparing for this.
Yeah, and I'll be honest, I'm not super interested in immigration. It's not really my thing. So I haven't read any articles. I've just been paying attention to like people like Tim Pool having a heart attack going, "Oh my God, here's what they're saying, yada, yada." And I'm like, all right, like whatever. I don't, okay. And that's why whenever he started saying, well, they're saying this was a charade and this was staged and yada, yada, yada. I was like, man, let me get a hold of Josh. Cause I don't know what to think about that. Like, I've never been there. I've never seen that. So I don't know. I've never experienced it. But another thing. Sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to reiterate that I didn't see anything in there that looked out of place, untoward. Just, nothing that would deviate from my experiences.
Yeah. Yeah. And another thing that we were looking at, when we were chatting is I told you about that Project Veritas video. And so you went and looked at that and you're like, yeah, that pretty much looks like the facilities that were there when I was working for Border Patrol. Yeah.
So you have the short-term facilities, which is, at the station, wherever they're apprehended. So you apprehend them somewhere out in the field, you take some quick information and you take them back in and you process them at your facility. So your facility is meant to hold people for no longer than 72 hours. That's what your average Border Patrol facility is meant to hold for at the most 72 hours. Most of the time we would hold people for 12 to 24 hours. But with the, with this big influx of families and unaccompanied minors, we just got overwhelmed. So yeah, there were times, there were times where we would hold people, up to a week, sometimes more than a week. Sometimes if they'd have to go to the hospital for something, and then when they get back, they'd kind of slip through the cracks, and their case file would get pushed back and pushed back. So sometimes people would spend way more time than legally they're supposed to be allowed to. But all those pictures, yeah, like everybody where we were, they were wrapped in those space blankets, those Mylar silver space blankets.
Mm-hmm.
Like every space on every bench and floor was occupied with a human body.
Right.
And we would separate the kids, we would separate the women, keep the families together, separate so the terminology we used was the family units and the kids were give ups, because they would get over and then just try to flag somebody down and try to say, that's how they would claim asylum.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of a misunderstood thing too. The difference between refugee and asylum. So refugees, you would go to either a consulate station in your home country and say, hey, the US is invading, or the CIA is paying, some radical group in our area to fight their war for them, and I don't feel safe in my country anymore. So can I come to the US as a refugee? And so then they would process you right there at the consulate or at a UN station or something like that. And you would get your papers pre-stamped, ready to go, and then get make your way to the US. So asylum is different. Asylum is kind of, you got to go now, you get up, you go, you leave. And when you get to the border, you apply for asylum there. And the Supreme Court has ruled that making an illegal entry and applying for asylum that way is just as legitimate as going to a port of entry. So the optics aren't great for them, for the people applying for asylum, but this is what their coyotes, this is what their guides are telling them to do. So what, most of these people are paying $10, $15, $20,000 for someone to guide them on this journey up here to apply for asylum.
Well, and then some of them, I was just going to say, some of them aren't even able to pay the full amount up front. So they're basically end up in this indentured servant kind of situation, to where they're beholden to the cartels. And so they're allowing the cartels to run drugs through their house and things like this. And this is, sometimes they end up with criminal records over things like this, that they were under the threat of death by the cartels. So they flee a dangerous situation in order to be put in a somewhat less dangerous situation, that they have to engage in order to find a better life for themselves. So it's really, like we were talking, it's really one of those situations where you're kind of torn on how do you actually, deal with this?
Well, I know that a lot of people, and even a lot of, quote unquote libertarians or anarchists or whatever, still seem to have a problem with this. And this is something that I wrestled with towards the end of my career, and the reason why I left. Mm-hmm. But what it comes down to is, this is what prohibition creates.
Yeah.
When it's no different from alcohol prohibition, drug prohibition. This is just the human manifestation of that prohibition. So when you're prohibiting humans from being able to choose where they can live and work, then these are the conditions you're creating. And that's it's not pretty, but that's what it boils down to. Like, it's not an easy question. There's no easy answers, but that's what it boils down to, is this is what prohibition creates.
Yeah, I was talking to Ryan yesterday, Ryan Bunting, and we were I had told him what you had said about the facilities, and it was like, yeah, this is what they've always looked like. And, and I was like, it's interesting because no matter what you feel about Trump, he is the one who kind of opened the average American's eyes to what was going down on with the facilities. It was only because of his presidency and his talk about the border, and then, all this that brought attention to these facilities. And,
Right.
and so it's kind of interesting because you look at it and it's, as you say, it's prohibition. I mean, this is what government intervention does. This really perverse incentive structure that the government, the state operates under, and they create these hardships that were not initially there and would not be there had, let's say, private property borders been the law of the land, so to speak. And so you watch it, and then you see that, and you and I had talked about this, and we'll move into this subject, but you see that they're spending like $400 a night on hotel rooms
Oh yeah.
for some of these immigrants to stay in, because these facilities are so full and overflowing. And so now you not only have this perverse, structure and incentive structure in place, but you also have the introduction of corporatism, of cronyism, of these big corporations getting favors. I mean, what kind of hotels are they staying at that are $400 a night? They're probably not putting them up in some 5-star resort, obviously.
No, I'm guessing it's going to be a Motel 8, but that's the whole thing with government contracts is, and maybe the $400 doesn't go to exclusively to the hotel. They may be, the cost of guards and food and whatever may be rolled into that price. But the $400 a night for a hotel, that's a tip of the iceberg. I mean, when towards my last couple of years, we were seeing NGOs, non-governmental organizations, that were starting up these facilities with federal money. So these guys are getting multi-million-dollar contracts. And in fact, one of the places that we used to take kids to was they just bought a hotel in Tucson. So this non-government organization with government money, with federal money, bought a hotel in Tucson, renovated it into a holding facility, but it's one of those hotels where all the doors are on the exterior, so it's not on the, it's not like you have hallways so you can just like guard exits.
Mm-hmm.
All the doors are on the exterior of the hotel, so you don't have a guard for every room. So it was pretty regular that we would go to drop somebody off or drop a group of people off, and the people there would say, hey, we just had some people run away. We checked their rooms and they weren't there anymore. Do you guys want to do anything about that? Like, well, when did this happen? Oh, a couple of days ago. What the fuck do you think we're gonna do? Like, they're not ankle monitored. They're not chipped. Like, what do you think that we are going to, like, our job as Border Patrol agents? We track footprints in the sand for the most part. Like, that's 90% of what we do.
Right.
The cameras, the sensors, those are all kind of like nice bells and whistles that can maybe help you in a pinch, but you rely almost entirely on being able to track footprints in the dirt.
Mm-hmm.
So what the hell are we supposed to, so we just say, okay, well, we'll let them know when we get back. So I mean, it's been a mess from the get-go. Like,
mm-hmm.
And I don't remember if I told you this already, but so it, right around 2014, when all this stuff started really picking up,
Mm-hmm.
the way that we dealt with it was we would take them in, we'd apprehend them from the field, take them in, process their case really quickly, the quickest thing possible. You do a notice to appear, and then you release them on their own recognizance. You take them to a bus stop and you wish them good luck. So They have their court case, they have all their paperwork, they have it in hand. You take them to a bus stop, they figure out how to get where they're going.
Mm-hmm.
And that was considered inhumane.
Right. It was considered inhumane because now you're just setting up a bunch of people out to live on the streets with no
Right.
guaranteed place to live. So they wanted these facilities built. So these facilities get built,
right.
and then the facilities
So-
get overrun, and it's the whole shit
Yeah.
show. Now that's
So-
inhumane.
Right. So now we're holding these people in these, these are barbaric. I mean, it's all concrete. There's not a soft surface anywhere. It's all concrete and stainless steel. The rooms are cold. I mean, I'm sure you've heard the stories about them being called the ice boxes. The rooms are kept cold. Supposedly, I mean, some people will say it's for torture reasons. The reason that was given to me is that bacteria breeds in warmth. So you keep the rooms cold so bacteria doesn't grow as fast. So,
well, you could also, there's also just the fact of the matter is that many bodies in a small space is going to create some heat.
right.
So, I mean, you want to keep the rooms cold so you can at least like monitor, like, and keep it at a livable,
right.
Temperature.
Yeah. I mean, the torture thing wouldn't surprise me because what the fuck else has our government been up to for however long? But the bacterial growth thing seems reasonable, at least to me as well.
Yeah.
As long as there's the possibility of some thought behind it, I'll entertain it. I don't think everybody in government, whether the outcomes are evil or not, I don't think that everybody in government is necessarily out to do harm per se.
Most of them are just completely incompetent.
Well, no, I think it's incompetence part of it, but you got to be fairly intelligent to like navigate the system to even get hired into the government. So, it's the following orders thing.
Yeah, well, and there's also
you got a ton of people that are worried about their paycheck and their pension. And what the fuck are you going to do to upset the apple cart if your paycheck and your pension is on the line? Like, I'm not trying to like pat myself on the back or anything, but those things just were not ever that important to me. Like, yeah, the paycheck was nice. Like, it was the most fucking money I've ever made in my life. And I don't have a college degree, so it's not like I have any prospects to make that much money ever again. But those things were just not, like, those were not the reasons I went into that service. But most people, that is. Like, I think most people that I talked to, they wanted a steady job, they wanted a retirement. And so for me, it was still fucking hard to walk away, really hard to walk away.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't really blame people for not. Like, I had a different career before I went. So I had a trade to fall back on, even though it's not what I want to be doing. A lot of people didn't have that.
Right. Well, what I was saying about the incompetence, it's not, I wouldn't say it's even the people like in the bureaucracy or the people working for Border Patrol that are incompetent. It's the people that are in government that are passing the laws. And then, so these people are passing all these laws and these regulations and this legislation, and then they give and then the people that are trying to figure out to solve the problems on the ground have a finite amount of money to carry out the regulation and the legislation that has been passed down to them and they've been ordered to follow. So now they're trying to figure out, okay, what can we do with the finite amount of resources we have that at least somewhat resembles what they're telling us we have to do down here on the ground. And it just turns into this complete shit show where you're putting band-aids over bullet wounds over and over and over again.
Well, and I would add to incompetence, ignorance. I heard, I don't remember where, I think it may have been on like the Reason podcast. And I'm not a Justin Amash stan by any stretch. Like, yeah, he's better than most on a lot of things, but he's still a Beltway politician, or he was at least. Mm-hmm. But I remember hearing him talk about like, why is DC the way that it is? And he's like, these people don't spend any time around their constituents. They live in DC most of the time. They're barely ever back in the areas where they're supposed to be representing. And the only information that they're getting is coming from these corporate media sources and the intelligence that people in the intelligence community decide to give them. So they don't really have a clear picture of what's going on, as compared to maybe people like us that are actually interested in the reality of what's going on. So you have these people making decisions on our behalf that don't really have any kind of clear picture of what's going on. So, I mean, you can add ignorance into an incompetence, because they're just getting like force fed this data that they don't really understand, and they say, okay, well, I guess I'll just vote yes on this.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and here's, I've heard it said plenty of times, and I agree with a lot of people that say this. People like you and I, well, not necessarily you and I, but people with the same similar ideology, like the more of the anarchist ideology as you and I, adhere to, or at least ponder and think about, will want to talk a lot in theory and concepts and what should be, and there's not enough focus on looking at how things actually are and what could actually improve this situation. So I'm under no illusion that tomorrow the government is going to give up the rights of the southern border and allow property owners to make the decisions for themselves, right? They're going to continue to kick people off of little portions of their property. And I think we talked about it the last time you were on, but there was that story about the guy who had bought the property on the river, and he had built his house directly on the river. And then when the eminent domain came through, he was trapped on the Mexican side of the wall as opposed to the American side of the wall. So even though he was on American property, American land, he was actually on the Mexican side of the border wall. And it was like, that is just, that's totally retarded. So like, getting rid of things like that ultimately is the goal. We don't want people's property being taken from them and used for government purposes. We want people to have that kind of authority over their own property, the type of autonomy to take care of themselves. But given the fact that that's not going to happen like that, what can we rightfully expect that might actually make some sort of, difference in the future?
Shit, that's I mean, I feel like, I shouldn't say the word feel, because then that, that gets construed as, well, you're not thinking, you're feeling. So I think that there are some fairly easy fixes to this, and there are historical, Cato, Alex Nurasa at Cato, and I mean, David Beer, there's a couple of guys at Cato that are doing really, really good work on this kind of stuff. I think it was in the 50s, there was the Bracero program, where basically fucking anybody that showed up to the border and said, I want to work, they said, all right, here's your card, go work. And the Border Patrol's job during that time was to go around these farms, or these agricultural areas, and look for people who didn't have their card. And when they'd find them without their card, they'd drive them down to the border, make them get a card, and then drive them back to the farm so they could keep working.
Mm-hmm.
And illegal immigration dropped by about 90%.
Right.
And then this civil rights hero that we all know so well, named Cesar Chavez,
mm-hmm.
put a stop to all that shit.
Yeah.
The United Farm Workers, Cesar Chavez, said, whoa. These guys they're getting in the way of union jobs. We can't have that. That's where the term illegal immigrant comes from, Cesar
mm-hmm.
Chavez.
Yep. So workers of the world unite, just not those workers.
Exactly. Right. Just not the ones that are willing to,
do the hard work.
Come in. Right.
Well, and if I'm not mistaken, what you're talking about, I just want to clarify what you're talking about. These people weren't living in the US. They weren't trying to live in the US. These cards were like day passes, right? And so they were living in Mexico and they were crossing the border daily to come to work. Is that
So
correct?
I think they were allowed to live in the U.S. while they were working. I don't know if there was probably like a time limit on those cards, and then you would have to leave, come back, and apply again.
Okay. Okay.
Um,
I knew that they weren't
but
permanent residents. I remember
no,
hearing this story, and Chavez threw a big fit. Oh, well, you can't let Mexicans come take American jobs. You know.
well, but that's a pretty common misconception, and this is something that I observed while I was a Border Patrol agent, and has been backed up by Cato's research and data.
Mm-hmm.
The vast majority of the people that we're keeping out don't want to come and stay. And in fact, the strict border policy has caused most of the ones that are here now that have roots put down. Most of the people in the past have wanted to come here, work for a period of time, save up some money, go back to where they actually lived and where they came from, where their families are, and take that money that they earned, or at least some of it, and go back. And when they need more, come back and work again.
You know what that sounds like? That reminds me of this company that was taking employees overseas to Iraq, letting the employees work there for 6 months, tax free, and then come back to the United States. And who was that? Oh, what was that company? Halliburton. It was Halliburton.
KBR,
Brown and Root. Brown and Root. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, and see, this isn't a new thing, and that's my point about it. These roughnecks, these roughnecks that work in the oil field that get all flustered about this. Well, a lot of your boys are doing the same thing, guys. A lot of your boys are going overseas and taking foreign jobs from foreigners. Making $200,000 a year in a 6-month period, coming back and living for a couple of years and then going back overseas. So that's all these people are trying to do.
So here's maybe a more relatable example than the farm workers. When I was in Afghanistan, one of my buddies there, his plan after we finished the deployment, he was going to go to Australia and work in a mine for a couple of years. He was going to make something like $235,000 a year to work in a mine.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, why the hell are they going to pay you that much? I mean, mining works, fairly lucrative now anyways in the US. So apparently Australia passed a rule that like fucking anybody can go to college for free. So now they've got a whole generation of philosophy majors that don't want to work in a mine. So they got to ship in people from other countries to go work. So this dude's like, yeah, I just spent a year in Afghanistan going down into a mine every day for a year for $235,000. Like he probably didn't make $40,000 in Afghanistan for that year.
Yeah.
To go down into a mine after getting fucking shot at and bombed and shelled for a year in Afghanistan, like, yeah, that's easy money comparatively.
Right.
So it's happening everywhere. It's not like the U.S. is some special case where that's not happening. But like, I bristle a little bit about the jobs Americans won't do. No, it's jobs Americans won't do for that price.
Right. Yeah.
Like I'll go, if you pay me my Border Patrol salary, I'll go work and pick whatever fucking vegetable you want. Like I'll go work in the hot sun, and I burn easy.
Apparently you'll do it for free.
Well, luckily I'm not that good of a grower. I don't have much to pick, but yeah, I mean it's not jobs Americans won't do. It's jobs that Americans won't do at that price.
Well, but there's a reason for that. All right. So like, and this is why the Federal Reserve is so important. It's the inflationary policy. It's the inflationary policy that's driven up the price of goods in the United States due to the overabundance of fiat currency. And then you got this situation where the boomers didn't want their houses to lose value, right? So basically what happened is the government regulated the cost of housing to go up every year. So,
Yeah.
so it keeps the price. It keeps the price of land and housing unnaturally high. So the unnatural cost of living in the United States has created a situation where the average American worker can't afford to do the work for the amount of money that the average Mexican citizen or Honduran that is fleeing a country that they may make like $20 a day, where they come here. And I've seen companies here in up in Houston, Texas, that they pay their workers $50 a day, and all they do all day long is change tractor trailer tires all day long, $50 a day, and that's hard fucking work. You ever fucking try to
those shits are
knock
heavy.
well, not even that. You're swinging a fucking sledgehammer all day. You're working with pry bars all day. Like that shit. That's some fucking
Are
work.
those tires like? Do they have the split ring seal?
Yeah.
Yeah. So we used to have to do that shit in the army, and that was a buddy of mine lost a finger doing that.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. On the big convoy trucks.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, you're looking at the same situation. And so yeah, man,
So
that's hard work,
you brought
especially
something up too.
especially when it's 95 degrees and 110% humidity in fucking Houston.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And these guys are making $50 a day, and three of them are renting a 1-bedroom apartment, together. Yeah. And so that's how they're surviving.
So what are they fleeing? What are the Guatemalans, Hondurans, El Salvadorans, Panamanians? What are these guys fleeing?
Why
are
I
things
mean,
so bad there?
yeah, well, things are so bad there because American interventionism on the part of American corporations. I talked to Josh Collins a while back about the multinational corporations in Colombia running the poor farmers out of business, taking over the marijuana grow market, and
Right.
things like that. I mean, it's just horrible, like the things that are happening in South America in the name of in our name with our tax dollars.
Yeah.
Like.
Right.
And they're doing it for our well-being.
Right.
It's fucking ridiculous.
Well, and installing dictators, fostering, our drug trade, the drug trade that feeds our country. I mean, that's where the most vicious shit goes down is those cartels that we essentially, through the U.S. interventions and operations in South and Central America have created this instability with those cartels having so much power, and our prohibition on drugs. How much fucking money could be made by American businesses by just legalizing everything? I mean, decrim, obviously some people prefer decrim. I simply don't give a shit. Like, legalize decrim, whatever.
I'm against the taxation that would come with legalization, but you know what? Paying those taxes for the ability to buy the product legally is much better than victimless crimes. Like people getting locked up for victimless offenses. So like, yeah, I can
pay the 20% tax if people aren't getting chopped to bits in El Salvador and Mexico and
right. Yeah, that too. But I'm talking about just the war on drugs here at home. That on top of it. So you would be solving multiple issues around the world, not only just here at home, but yes, in El Salvador, Colombia, and all these places. But you can also look back. What was it? 2018, 19? It was 2019 when the U.S. failed twice to overthrow the government of Venezuela. And so, they tried to install, Maduro, right? Is that who they tried to install, or is that who they tried to overthrow?
I think that's who they tried to overthrow.
Yeah. So absolutely, they're fleeing these situations, and a lot of these situations are, like, as you were saying earlier, they're more like refugee situations, but they don't understand that. And then there is a gang aspects. And, I heard a story about a lady whose, brother-in-law wanted her dead, and he had been threatening to kill her for years, and he came and shot at her, and she fled. Okay. Like there's shit like that too, but there's a lot of strife in these places because of American intervention in the countries.
Right. I would say the vast majority. And I mean, strife in American cities because of the drug trade.
Yeah. Well,
Like
the war on drugs
the,
in general, yeah,
right.
it's caused so much problems.
Not only people being locked up, but like the vast majority of gang warfare is over territory, and that territory has to do with the drug trade.
Yeah, it's all
If you
about the
take that
prohibition.
ability away from them,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. So I mean, that's one of the biggest things I hear, kind of conservative leaning folks complaining about with immigration. And I'm like, well, that doesn't have anything to do with immigration. That has to do with drug policy. That's those most of what people complain about immigration, which is welfare. For one, you're not even eligible for welfare for the first if you legally come. You're not
Well,
legally.
I will actually dispute that, and the only reason I have any grounds to dispute that on, I know that's technically the law. I I know that's on paper the way it's written, but that's not the way it works. Because the first thing they asked my wife when we went to apply for her green card, hadn't even gotten a green card yet. They asked, "Are you on any kind of assistance?" And we said no, and they looked at us like, "Are you sure?" And it's like, "No, we're not on assistance." Like, so they almost want you to fill it out. They tried to get us to fill it out right there on the spot. So
Yeah, I mean, as far as the law goes, as far as I understand the law, no immigrant is eligible for any kind of public assistance,
for like 3 years or
welfare.
something like that.
5 years. 5 years.
5 years. Yeah. Yeah. That's how it's written. But that's operationally, that's just not how it works. I don't.
The other thing I've come to realize, and you've brought it up a couple of times, that made me think about this. And I know, conservatives aren't really that ideologically consistent, but if they were, and they're the ones that claim to care about the Constitution, you know how many times the Constitution mentions immigration?
Oh, tell me.
A couple of times. In the 14th Amendment, a couple of times, it says that the federal government has the responsibility to create a uniform naturalization policy. And it also states that if you were born in and subject to the laws of the United States, you are a citizen. So that's that was intended for the slaves, but it does apply to, at first they tried not to apply it to the Native Americans, and eventually the Supreme Court said that they had to, but it now also applies to immigrants as well.
Well, and but, you know who's found that very useful is China, because what's been happening over the last few decades are the wealthy Chinese families that are attached to the CCP have been coming over here to birth their children, then bringing the children back and sending them over here for college education, and those children are actually part of the CCP and working within the Communist Party of China and trying to infiltrate the United States. So it's pretty interesting the way that has been used against the United States.
Right. I mean, anything like that, you try to create these rules thinking you're doing the best to protect yourself, and somebody's going to find a fucking way around it. So it's either you're going to have totalitarianism, which seems to be the cure du jour, or you let the market decide, which I think is what you and I would prefer.
Yes.
But so if we're going to follow the Constitution, and the 14th Amendment only says you're able to create a uniform naturalization process and that you're a citizen by being born here, well, where the hell do we get the justification to create all these other restrictions and quotas and visa categories and all this? Where does all that come from? It's not mentioned anywhere else in the Constitution. And if it's not mentioned anywhere else in the Constitution, what does the 10th Amendment tell us to do?
Leave it up to the states. Yep.
Right. So the fact that we have a DHS in charge of border policy in the first fucking place is absolutely unconstitutional. I'm not a constitutional scholar. I'm a college dropout, but I can read words And I most of the time know what they mean. So, you know, if we're going to go, I could give really, the Constitution hasn't really seemed to help us much since they don't give a fuck about the First, Second, or Fourth Amendment. Nobody else seems to really give a shit about it, so why should we? But if we're going to at least have this guise, if we're going to pretend like we have a constitution, well, where are we getting the justification for all these immigration restrictions then? Give it to the states.
Well, the fact of the matter is, yes, you're absolutely right. And when you look at the Constitution, the one thing I always try to remember is that the Constitution is there to bind the government. It is not there to bind the citizens. It is not the law that holds the citizens accountable. It is the law that binds the federal government. And when you start easing up and allowing the federal government to chip away a little bit at a time into this Constitution, eventually it is worth nothing more than words on fucking parchment. And that's all it is today. That's all it is anymore. It has absolutely zero meaning or power whatsoever. It means nothing to anybody anymore unless they can use it to bludgeon their opponents over the head with the words on that paper. They don't pay any attention to that fucking paper.
Right. And I just made the cardinal sin of interchanging we when I'm talking about the government. People do it all the time, and I try to pay attention to that because I don't count myself among them. Like George Carlin said, it's a big fucking club and you ain't in it.
Right.
So I should no longer say we when I'm talking about something that they are doing.
Exactly.
But, it's, something I do,
you're right.
do it all the time.
All right, man. Well, we're running up close to an hour. I'm sweating my ass off. My dog's in here panning. What you got any final thoughts on what we're looking at here on the border and what we should be looking for? Would there be any red flags that if we see, then there is an actual problem?
Not really. I mean, other than the fact that our president has dementia or whatever is wrong with him, like so he came out with this plan, and it's pretty broad and wide. It's a very ambitious plan, and I think what he's trying to do is make up for all the deportations and all of the crackdowns that happened under Obama, and that he's attached to that. I don't think very much of that's going to make it through Congress, just because they don't have the supermajority to get all that stuff through. Yeah, I mean, I don't see these people as a problem. These people that are fleeing these awful situations that our country has created for them. So it's one of those things where it's like, yeah, it's a fucked up thing, but it's really all a product of the situations and the rules that our country, that our government has put into place. Yeah. And they've figured, I think I told you before, the smugglers know our laws way better than our average citizen does.
Mm-hmm.
Way better. And so every time they pass a new one, you'll see a little lull in activity. And as soon as they figure out how to circumvent or work around or whatever, whether it's infrastructure, whether it's cameras, sensors, whatever, legislation, they'll take a little break, they'll have a little meeting, and when they figure out a way to work around it, then they'll come and work around it. And so it doesn't fucking matter what we do. It doesn't matter what our country does. So to me, it just makes sense to recognize that this is a problem that's not going to go away. And let's start dealing with it like adults and figure out, well, what do people want? They want to come work. Okay, let's make it easy for the people who are not out here to I'm not saying that there's no bad actors trying to get across that border, but let's make it real fucking easy for the good actors to get across and do what they want to do and then go back when they're done.
Yeah.
Like that's, I mean, it sounds simplistic, and I know I say that there's not a lot of simple answers, but like, that makes just about as much sense as anything else to me. Like,
Yeah. Well, I've
simplify
told
it as much as you possibly can.
I've tried to tell conservative friends of mine, you have much more in common with that illegal dude working on a construction site doing fucking sheetrock and masonry work than you do with those fuckers in DC. You know,
Absolutely.
if we want to build a
Absolutely.
wall, we should build that wall around DC. Luckily, they're doing it for us.
They are. All right, Tommy, man, thanks for having me on.
All right, brother. I'm gonna put it.
If anybody wants to hear more of my ramblings, and in the next couple months when I release my book of short stories, follow me on Twitter at Josh D Childress. That's all I got to plug. I don't do anything else except for fucking hang out with my kids and work and
that's the life, man.
Write shit on Twitter. Yeah.
That's the life. All right. Well, let me end the recording. I wanted to talk to you about something.
You wanna be a hero, said you're just a slave. All your good intentions took you to your grave. Your pride is how they killed you, with the flag you waved just like a fool. They promised you a mountain, gifted you a stone. They demanded that you throw it into your neighbor's home, and then seize all that they worked for and give it to the throne just like a tool. Well, as we all just stand in line and glorify new ways of being cruel, it seems to me humanity is not something that they're teaching us in school. They dumb us down all around, propaganda, their pollution. They set a cage up on the stage, a facade for all solution. They build a wall, block them all from this mental institution. It's insane. Now they're writing their own rule books and they're crossing all their T's. They're fashioning their people to all wear beggars' knees. If you want a clean drink of water, well, you must say pretty please. It's all a game. As we all just stand in line and justify these crimes done in our names, it seems to me authority and tyranny are both one and the same. Well, it's time to change the channel. It's time to set things right. Make them all rot with fear in their beds at night. Devour all their worthless souls and sacrificial right, just like we should. Of those who are to blame, and we'll stack them up like cordwood, watch them sizzle on the flames for good. Well, as we all just stand in line waiting for some kind of Robin Hood, our liberty will never be until our right to freedom is understood. Thank you.